Right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along to the first seminar of the day. So we've got three speakers today. Phil Hadley from AHDB, Nick Jolly from Beef and Lamb New Zealand, and Mike Gooding, representing yourself, I believe, today, independent consultant. So we're covering today the UK's sheep sector is fortunate in its range of outlets, but where should we focus our future efforts? Volume sales of commodity product or added value markets? This seminar will tackle these big questions and help individual businesses plan for the future. So we'll invite our speakers up to do their talks, and then at the end of that we'll invite questions from the audience. So we'll kick off, if we could start with Phil Hadley to speak. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, thanks Dan. So, I mean, I think the discussion and the questions is the interesting part of this debate, so good to have an international representative as well. I'm going to touch on how we see it from an AHDB point of perspective and the work we do to promote exports, but also domestically the underpinning the reputation of the product to keep lamb in front of consumers and keep consumers wanting to buy our lamb products. So from a sheep meat point of view, from an AHDB point of view, we have an active export programme across the proteins, particularly lamb. We're a big producer of lamb. We're over 100% self-sufficient, so we need to export that product, as well as being an importer as well. You know, we export certain cuts and certain products, and we import the products that we want to balance the carcass. And of course, in the lamb trade, there's the seasonality of that production. We're a net exporter in the second half of any calendar year and a net importer in the first half, principally from our colleagues in New Zealand and Australia. So we're always looking for market opportunities to get that product to overseas countries, to make sure that we've got outlets for the products and we're not beholden on any one individual market. Historically, we've been very committed to Europe, but we need to spread our products further. And the question, you know, is it volume or is it value? It's both. It's high value products to markets that will pay for them, and it's volume commodity trade for products like fifth quarter material, offal type products, to move products, bring in value and balance that carcass. And we've also got to think about the changing profile of where the competition and the challenge is going to come from. So we have new trade agreements, product potentially coming in, competing with our own domestic products. So our reputation of producers of high quality sheep meat, we need to defend that, keep UK consumers loyal to the product, but also compete on that global market, both in terms of quality and price. So I touched on the trade negotiation aspect. We're entering a phase now for the sheep sector where we'll compete not only on those international markets, but also arguably be more challenged on the domestic market. So I realise these screens are a little small, so I'm going to just point to a few key elements of the visual. So our lamb exports are worth about £450 million a year, so about 73,000 tonnes of product is exported from a total production of around 300,000, and those are some of the markets that we're into. Of course, we remain heavily committed to Europe. Europe's just over the water. Yes, it's got more difficult. Yes, there's more bureaucracy. Yes, there's more cost. But we've got a product there that has a great reputation. It is in demand and it's recognised by European consumers, and they keep buying it at a price. There's a limit on price, of course, but it's still a product that sells well in the European marketplace, although we have challenges. So just some numbers. Red meat export values, beef, lamb and pork, about 1.4 billion. Total sheep production about 300,000 tonnes, and we're exporting around 25% of that, 73,000 tonnes. The bulk goes to Europe. We're keen to manage some of that risk by making sure that some of that goes elsewhere. Kill around 12 to 13 million a year. Exports volume is down, but the price is stable. Again, you know, reflecting the fact that the price has risen markedly and therefore has tempered some demand. You probably can't visualise that, but the bullseye in the bottom left corner demonstrates the blue Circle, which is 51% of the market. France is a very important market for us and remains so, as well as near Europe and then some broader markets. And from a retail level, lamb volumes sales at retail are down year on year, but the price has gone up again markedly. So price in the last data report has gone up more than 11%. So price is going to become increasingly sensitive for consumers when it comes to lamb purchase. So you have to bear that in mind, and we have to make sure that when they're purchasing lamb, that it delivers and then it has all the story around it that drives them to keep purchasing it against what are pretty challenging circumstances ahead. In terms of what we do at AHDB, we're looking for those overseas markets to develop them. We gain access working with government and industry. We facilitate trade in and out, and we have exchanges on trade platforms to build those relationships. We've got here, there's a group of 5 US sheep meat buyers that are on the showground at the moment. They're here because we're at the point of finalising our access agreement to get UK sheep meat into the US for the first time in 20, 30 years. So significant opportunity there to open a new market, and it will grow over time. They're excited about the product and they see it as a potential outlets within their market. So that's the type of work we do to develop the trade and develop those relationships in the key markets that we're working in, and we're working hand in hand with both government and industry to open, develop and turn those into commercial realities. And again, that gives us market opportunities, and it also means that we can put a ceiling in the price, or a floor in the price rather, not a ceiling, a floor in the price, because you've got multiple buyers. The team is spread across some key regions there, where we are heavily reliant on Europe, but in the last 5 or 10 years we've spread the opportunity there. Middle East region, growing opportunity for UK sheep meat, Asian markets, and now into the US. So there's growth potential there, and diversifying our export opportunities beyond simply Europe. And in terms of the trade development, just some access wins there. I've touched on the US, that's just about to turn into commercial reality. We've been successful in gaining access to Japan in the last 2 or 3 years, a small market that will grow over time. And there's an inward mission of Taiwanese government officials where we're seeking access to get UK lamb into Taiwan in the latter half of 2022. So we're positive for, again, more growing opportunities. And we use platforms like international events like Gulf Food in the Middle East. CL Paris is coming up in October, which is a major trade event for buyers of food around the world, and particularly from our perspective, red meat. So it's where a lot of business is done. And we're promoting our products via digital channels as well, more so in the last 2 or 3 years than ever before. So getting the UK red meat story, the UK lamb story in front of buyers around the world. And with that goes the reputation piece. So both domestically at home and internationally, we're competing for consumers' attention, particularly lamb where it's a high price protein. So we have to make sure that we have all those positive things that underpin assurance, quality, grass-fed, etc. So we build our reputation. We've got a great product, we've got a great reputation as well. We continue to try and grow that reputation so that consumers preferentially look for our products and they're willing to pay for those products because we have all those attributes. But we're competing on that global marketplace. We're competing with others who also have a story to tell. So we have to underpin that reputation to make sure that consumers still want to buy our products. Domestically at home, we're conveying that message through the Eat Balance campaign, challenge around meat reduction, the role of meat consumption and health, diet, environment, trying to make sure that consumers stay loyal to the product and buy it, continue to buy it, and about building the consumers' long-term attitudes and promoting red meat and dairy as part of a sustainable, healthy diet, and not, an antidote to the plant-based protein, vegan-type messaging that proliferates and is in front of consumers a great deal more than we could hope to be. But we're trying to be very targeted with the messages to the consumers that are wavering on their red meat purchasing. and also defending the reputation by becoming much more aggressive in challenging some of the falsehoods that are portrayed around meat in the diet and around the role of meat consumption, and particularly adverts that champion plant-based and vegan proteins that often have spurious claims. So on our advertising material we use fact-based claims about nutrition and health, and we've been challenged on them, but we're able to defend them through evidence. In turn, our comms people are now challenging the vegan messages, and often they don't have the evidence base, and they end up having to be withdrawn. So we're looking for fact-based information in the marketplace to help consumers make informed choices about red meat purchase. So from a UK sheep meat perspective, we've got a great reputation globally. We've got production that suits the local environment, sustainable, traditional, all that heritage story. Grass-based production, although looking around the local countryside, grass is struggling, of course. It will come back, it will rain again, I'm sure. And our standards around grass feeding and maturation mean we've got an excellent eating quality product. The US visitors that are here right now are really quite impressed with the quality of the product, and it's as good as anything they're importing from anywhere else. So, you know, we can compete on a global stage if we can get the offer and the pricing right. We've got high welfare and sustainability credentials, and we're looking to target the growth in both commodity markets because they're important, but also in those higher value markets. So, you know, volume or value, it's both, but we need a vibrant industry that produces a great quality product that our commercial industry can go out and sell that to their meat buyers and consumers around the world and domestically. Thank you, Dan.
So, thank you very much, Phil. So without further ado, we'll hand over to Nick Jolly, who joins us from New Zealand today. So, to you, Nick.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone. It's really good to be here this morning. Firstly, a little bit about myself and beef and lamb. I'm from a sheep and beef farm down in the South Island of New Zealand, where we run around 3,000 merino ewes, and then obviously the lambs after that, and around 500 cattle. I work for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, which, similar to AHDB, is a levy body. I'm a senior trade policy advisor focusing on environment and international cooperation. So this is our farm back home, sort of looking the view out. You can see it's a little bit drier, although, as Phil said, quite similar to some of England at the moment in Wales. There's tailing up in the hills, and just to sort of tie it back to here, here's a farm around the corner called Malvern Hills. So we do have our ties back to the UK. So New Zealand's obviously very well known as a sheep meat producer as well, and it's very important for our economy. Over 95% of our sheep meat is exported, and so we're heavily reliant on international market access. Looking back to the 60s, that was our export profile, and as you'll see, it was dominated by the United Kingdom. As you know, the UK joined the European community as it was in the 70s, and we lost a lot of our market access. At that point, we didn't really have any other options, and that combined with policies that took away all of the subsidies in the 80s meant it was very, very difficult for farmers. From then, we have moved into a policy of market diversification, and 2022, you'll see that our export profile has changed dramatically. China has become more important, the United States has become more important, and our exports to the European Union have reduced as we've sought access into these Asian markets. This is just a diagram, hopefully you can see from back there, but showing how we've shifted from a carcass-dominated trade in the 70s through to one focusing on cuts and matching cuts to consumers and markets. So back in the day, we used to try and sell leg roasts to Asian housewives, and then we have realised that that is not the best way to sell lamb, and we've moved to focusing on cuts, that it's such as sort of stir-fry cuts and moving into these Asian On top of that, we've focused exports into the United States, and it's good to see that the UK is going to be joining us there. The United States has had a historically low consumption of lamb, resulting from a lot of American servicemen eating lamb in the Pacific throughout the Second World War and then never wanting to see a lamb again when they returned. Those servicemen have had children, those children have had children, and they're the consumers that we're targeting now. People that don't know that lamb is a tasty, ethical, and environmentally friendly choice. This diagram just gives a quick overview of where our exports are going. So as you can see, instead of sending a carcass into one market and then trying to convince consumers they need to eat all of it, we're focusing on matching the cuts to the cuisine of the people. An example here would be our free trade agreement into China in 2008, which was one of the first Western countries to do so, and cuts such as the lamb flat, which traditionally we donated as food aid to the Pacific Islands, became one of the highest value cuts per kilo because it fits very well with hot pot cuisine. Along with the Chinese market, we also have exports into other Asian markets around in our region, and with the UK looking to join CPTPP, or the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Bit of a mouthful. These will provide good opportunities for UK sheep meat producers to match cuts to consumers in those markets. This resilience has been important both for increasing value, but then ensuring that when there are shocks to the global economy, as we've seen with COVID, that we can redirect product into different markets. So when COVID first happened, ports in China shut down and we weren't able to get product in, but we were able to shift it to markets in the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Arabic countries, back to into the United States, Japan, and other markets. Looking to the future, this is, sheep meat is something that we should all be cooperating on. It's only 2% of global protein consumption. There is huge demand for ethically produced, sustainable and nutritious protein. We should all be working together to grow the market here. Asia, as I said, is continuing to grow. There are other economies that are likely to follow China's path, Vietnam being one. The US also is a market where we can grow exports and educate consumers about sheep meat. And then looking way into the future, there's also African markets which may be more appropriate to the UK sheep meat producers due to the geographic location. Things that we need to really work on together though are this cooperation and telling the message, pushing back against some of these vegan claims that are becoming much more coordinated. So beforehand we had the animal welfare arguments, the environmental arguments, and the nutrition arguments, and these are all building into the same very well funded arguments against sheep meat. Consumers want to know that when they go into the shop and they see lamb on the shelf, that they can be proud of eating it. Our competition here isn't British sheep meat producers, it is, and I can say this because we only represent beef and lamb, but it's pork and it's chicken. An example here as well would be looking into the European market, where they are looking at bringing in restrictions and regulations around the supply of beef to ensure that it hasn't been produced in a way that contributes to deforestation. This we absolutely support, but it has the potential to put a lot of costs on beef producers. They are now looking at adding sheep meat to the mix, and with New Zealand and the UK combining to make up 90% of European sheep meat imports, this is something that is likely to affect our farmers and also all of you in terms of increased certification costs to demonstrate that our product is being produced in a sustainable way. Looking to the future, we are working with the the UK, Canada, US, and Australia to form a global sheep producers alliance, also covering wool and sheep dairy, to tell our story much better and to educate consumers. This is something that will be really important in encouraging the next generation, which is obviously the future of sheep farming anywhere, to share ideas and tell the story in a comprehensive and coherent way. I'm really excited about it, and hopefully in November we can sort of share a bit more about what we're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. So we'll go straight on to our last speaker, who's Mike Gooding, before we take questions. So over to Mike. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks very much, Dan. And as you said in your introduction, I'm truly independent today, representing myself. Let's face it, no other bugger's going to do it. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and speak this morning. This was the task we were set as a panel of speakers to try and address some of these issues. And I'm going to take a view about perhaps some of the broader things that are going on in the world, and think about where our opportunities really lie. One of the things that I think should focus us at this moment in time is the Little and Large show that's going on in Westminster at the moment. And I would ask the question, will a new Prime Minister actually change anything for us as a farmer? I see somebody going like that at the back of the audience, and I'm in complete agreement with you, sir. It's not going to make the slightest bit of difference. But we do as an industry need to engage and try and make sure that we keep pushing what, frankly, in the bigger debates going on at the moment around things like where the hell's the money going to come from, the cost of living crisis, food security, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the moment. I can tell you that the future of the sheep industry will be quite low down on the agenda, unfortunately, for those of us as sheep producers. As the previous two speakers have shown, it's completely pointless putting up graphs on these screens because you can't see any of them. But what that does show, actually, that's an AHDB report from this last week, Phil. It shows that consumption, the orange bars, has dropped off. And it's interesting, it fascinates me that during lockdown we saw lamb sales increase so much. Apparently, when we start eating at home as consumers, the only things we can do is roast a leg of lamb and cook mince. We can't stir fries, well beyond the capabilities of the average UK kitchen, Nicholas. So we saw things rise, and it interests me that much of that was driven by butchers and farm shops, and where there was an interaction between the consumer and the purchases they were making when they were perhaps uncomfortable about what the hell they did with this lump of meat that they have bought. Of course, post-pandemic, we've seen everybody going back out again, and lamb struggles in the service sector market because of the price. I don't want to see the price of lamb come down as a sheep farmer, so we need to think very carefully about how we match things to particular markets. I think that's the point that Nicholas made very, very clearly. So should we be thinking about domestic or export, the challenge that we were given as part of this presentation? As Phil rightly said, it's both. I'm afraid it's not very exciting to talk about a balanced argument, but that is the reality of it. We need to access whatever markets we can. The EU is absolutely critical to us. It was by luck, Dan, I would suggest, rather than better judgment, we got through the 1st of January a couple of years ago. We've continued to keep exporting to a market that desperately wants our product. The non-EU market development, as Phil talked about, is down to us. Nobody else is going to do it for this industry other than the industry itself. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of investment, and an awful lot of hard work. But at the end of the day, demand is increasing. In the hour that we sit in this tent this morning, there'll be an extra 10,000 mouths on this planet for us to feed. And as a farmer, as a food manufacturer, that is one hell of a marketing opportunity. We just have to get out there and grab those opportunities. There are lots of issues, as both the two previous speakers have mentioned, around our ability to market our products. But we just have to grab those and deal with them, because nobody else is going to do them. So demand is increasing. And in a market, in any market, it's basic economics. Where demand increases and supply becomes tighter, prices go up. And that's what we've seen with our sheep prices over the last couple of years. We managed to keep continuing exporting in volume to our continental markets. New markets, thanks to the sorts of things that Phil are doing, are opening up. If we push up the demand side of the equation and supply stays either where it is or diminishes, price will stay firm. I remember doing a presentation down in Exeter before Christmas, and I made 3 predictions. I've forgotten one of them, but 2 of my predictions were deadweight price would stay over £5 a kilo, so I got that right, and I said Boris Johnson would be gone by Easter. So slightly wrong on that one, but not far out. So I think actually we overcomplicate some of these things when we look at them. It is simply a function of supply and demand. And what people choose to eat will vary. If some people choose to follow a vegan diet, crack on, good luck to them. We shouldn't be trying to, if you like, defend that position. We should let people make the choices. Our responsibility is to make sure that we are presenting our product as well as we can. And I don't think we've been very good at that, to be honest with you. So can we, in our lamb markets, insulate us from what I think is going to be an increasingly volatile world? Anybody who thinks the world is going to be calm and we're going to go back to where we were a few years ago, it just ain't going to happen. And you can see how food, through what Putin has done in the Ukraine, and energy and water, will be used as weapons. And the reality is actually we have no food security strategy in this country. We have no policies where food security is at the top of the agenda. And that's a fundamental problem that we have to get, as a country, we have to sort out and get our heads around. This is an interesting slide, if you can see it, because it's an advert from Sainsbury's. This was what was headlined at their producer conference back before Christmas. What it says to me is there's no dairy and there's no meat on that slide, and this is their current advertising campaign about helping everyone to eat better, and it's all about fruit and vegetables. Retailing is very simple. Like so many of these discussions that we're having, when you strip it down to the simple points, it's not actually that difficult. A retailer rents shelf space. If you rent 2 foot of shelf space and somebody else comes along and is prepared to offer more rent for that shelf space, your product is out and their product is in. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to that, the lost leaders that we hear about, things like milk. But lamb, we're in that critical point of trying to secure shelf space. And understanding what motivates the supply chain and what drives them is critical. Nobody's out there to do any favours for us. And I don't think as farmers we're actually very good at answering the questions. We're not very good at talking to consumers about things like nutritional values, the sustainability benefits of lamb, the wider issues around livestock agriculture. It's interesting that Phil read out a list of key USPs, if you like, about lamb in terms of nutrition and flavour and those sorts of things. Nicholas would make exactly the same claims, and justifiably so, for New Zealand and Australia. We actually have to do much better at being able to communicate some of those things. This, I think, was actually a very good publication, which the 3 levy bodies got together. This was around COP26 last year. And actually, it's a really good document. And if you've not looked at it as a farmer, you should go online. I'm sure it's still up there, Phil. It's well worth looking at because it puts in some very simple terms some of the myths and it puts out some of the truths. And we as livestock farmers should be able to articulate all of these things. When it comes down to me as a farmer and understanding what my customers want, that's another area I think where we've got to raise our game as farmers. This is a really interesting article that appeared in the Farmer's Guardian just last week. It's a chap down in Kent growing fruit. The comment that he made that really caught my eye was he said, the most money I've ever lost was when I grew my biggest crop. So it's just not about yield. And I think that's really a really important statement when you pick it apart. It's about understanding what the customers want, where I can make the most margin. Not about what a show judge thinks is the best animal because it's got the best shaped ears, but what the customers actually are prepared to pay for and whether it's sustainable or not. I think there's this key question we should all be asking ourselves is, why are we in business? This is well worth reading this article and drawing some similarities. So here's another pointless chart that you can't actually see on the screens. Try and focus if you can on the two bottom lines and the red line, yellow line in the middle. What this is the deadweight farm gate price in euros across all the countries, the major countries of the world. The two at the bottom are New Zealand and Australia, and the top one is actually France, and the UK is the red one that's sort of in the middle. What I hope you can see from that graphic is over the last 10 years or so is actually the differential has got much closer. So the price of the lamb going into the processor here in the UK and the price of lamb going into the processor in New Zealand and Australia is not hugely different. I mean, I remember us as farmers often talking about they have so many lower costs of production and it's easier for them in New Zealand. When you look at actually when the price goes into the processor and then onto the consumer market, that cost to the processor is not hugely different. There are not a great amount of differences between what we're doing here and what's happening in other parts of the world. Actually, if I were to be asked, do I see New Zealand and Australia as a threat, I would say that actually I see this global population growth as our single biggest opportunity for us as farmers. And as a food manufacturer, that for me has got to be good news. The Kiwis and the Aussies can't do it all by themselves. And it doesn't matter where you go in the world, which pre-COVID we used to do quite a lot of. The one thing I can guarantee you'll come across is a Kiwi and an Aussie who's been there 20 years and is doing a great job with a very good product. Actually, our opportunity as UK farmers is to raise our level of ambition and think about how perhaps we work alongside some of these people, not to push them out of markets, but to find a way that we can work together to our mutual benefit and fill in some of the seasonal gaps or where they're not able to supply market opportunities. That for me requires a different mindset. It requires ambition and energy and drive. What should I be thinking as a farmer to do about the marketing of my stock? Well, the key things that go through my mind, and just as perhaps suggestions to consider, is how do I ensure I get more value back down through the supply chain to me? There are processing opportunities that are farmer-owned, farmer-led. I think the most important thing is that we stay, whether we choose to sell animals live or dead, we stay in very close contact with what the buyers are looking for and understanding what they are after. I'm also looking for a supply chain that supplies me with more information. We hear so much talk about data. Actually, one of the biggest lessons I made as a sheep farmer is when I started to use EID tagging as an opportunity to identify exactly what was happening with my breeding program. Actually, almost instantly, I changed where I bought my rams for as a result and started to make some money. And that was all a data-driven opportunity. And I would look about how we can promote better our understanding of the value of lamb to consumers as part of a truly sustainable future. If we don't crack that problem, lamb is always going to, I think, be a poor relation. So it's down to us. This is a picture I took in one particular abattoir just before Christmas. Some farmers think it's good to send stock like that into an abattoir. Nicholas and his processors in New Zealand are able to put 90-day shelf life on their products because they have highly mechanised, clean, consistent processing. We still struggle with people who think it's good to try and get stuff like that away through an abattoir, and we end up with a 30-day shelf life. So where is our level of ambition for us in the UK as a farming community? So in conclusion, Dan, I would say that the world appears to have finally woken up to the value of food. It's really become into sharp focus, the whole issue of food security. Now, I would suggest, is the time for UK producers to be far more ambitious, to secure more value of their product, and perhaps redefine where we sit in the entire supply chain. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Well, thank you very much, Mike, indeed. I think there's a huge amount there for thought. I'll just remind people of the title of this, which is where is the balance between our diverse market opportunities? Do anybody have any questions or any views on what they've heard and what they might be? Put that out to the floor. But it's I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Is which market should we be targeting, and how we're going to get into these, David. So.
Hi, David Croston. Just a question for Phil. Our trade to Europe used to be a big carcass trade. Not a lot of cuts went to Europe. I just wondered what you're doing working with cutting plants, thinking of America in particular, because I assume from what our New Zealand friend has said that the cuts are much more attractive over there than the carcasses, and probably logistically difficult, easier to do cuts. So what's AHDB doing to make that US trade deals work? And thirdly, how do you think the labour shortages in cutting plants is going to affect an impact on your plans?
Yeah, thanks, David. Important questions. Clearly, the more sophisticated the processing is, the more labour you need, and labour is an issue. There's mechanisation, and it goes so far. The US visitors that are here right now, they've been into plants and commented on the fact that we've got more labour, less mechanisation than they see in other countries, and that comes with some pluses and minuses. So hand cutting reduces bone fragments, for example, but to Mike's point, hand cutting also reduces shelf life because you've got more cross-contamination risk. So there is a balance between being able to service a cut customer with the labour issue, and it's become more acute in the last period. The challenge of those marketplaces, or the opportunity you might say, is that if you're further processing the products, you've got more opportunity to add more value, and from a processing perspective, you've then got multiple items that you can sell to individual markets to maximise the value. But that's not without its challenges in terms of you need to place all of those products in the market. So there's an evolution. Some processors are doing a better job or more focused on that than others, but there has been a shift to some more cut-based commercial trade. And of course, some customers, they really want pre-packaged, ready products that go straight onto the shelf, and some processors are providing that, others are unable to, so they remain focused on that carcass trade. The more you process it, the more opportunity to add further value.
Mike's going to come in there.
Yeah, I think, David, the carcass trade, particularly to Europe, still remains strong, actually, and we shouldn't ignore that. Logistically, though, when you go further afield than Europe, sending carcasses becomes much more difficult. Just from a pure logistics point of view, it's relatively inefficient. Going across 22 miles of water or through a tunnel is relatively straightforward. despite the paperwork nonsense and the challenges. But if we look at thinking about markets further afield, it becomes, I think, debatable as to whether we should be even trying to send carcasses, particularly into markets that are demanding fresh product. I think morally we should be questioning whether actually flying carcasses around the world is the right thing to be doing in this day and age anyway. So that's where I think we need to work with, alongside people like Nicholas to think about, how we can dovetail with some of the other things that are going around the world. But we won't do that if we can't match the product specification that the customer rightly demands, like the 90-day shelf life. It means investment.
I mean, I guess just to expand on that point a little bit further is that because of the strength of our European market, we haven't needed to focus on that extended shelf life because it's sold and consumed within that period. The further we go, the more shelf life we need, particularly if you've got packaged, chilled products. And that is an issue the industry will need to address in due course.
Thank you. Does that cover your question, David? Neil, did you have a question? Yeah.
Firstly, a very good presentation. I just really wanted to say that to Phil, the vegan argument, I think very much is there's lots of people out there, especially expectant mothers, are just not getting enough protein, and so I think we don't want to take it aggressively, but I think we really need to explain to the population that eating some meat is very good for you. Mike, on the food production and security with the Ukraine and the Russians, the dastardly Russians, what they're doing is really highlighted food, and I think the environment and the grass that we keep and that keep our sheep on, really got to emphasise that more than ever. We're a temperate climate, we should be producing food, full stop. And can I say to Nicholas, you are getting lamb into America, so what's the secret? Come on, you can tell us here. It's a secret safe with us. We won't tell anybody else. So those are a few questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Probably starting quite a wee while ago and slowly working to build it. It takes time to build a market, and you're never going to sort of jump in there and switch from Europe to the US straight away. Not that you'd want to, but you need to start small, building customers, delivering a product that they want, and have them knowing that what they order turns up on time and to a consistent quality. Just sort of going back to some of the vegan arguments, I think the issue isn't necessarily people not eating sheep meat and us trying to convince them to eat sheep meat. It's the power of some of these groups that in international and domestic policy making. So an example would be greenhouse gas metrics and ensuring methane is treated in a way that reflects its warming potential. We all need to band together and ensure that the most up-to-date science is used, rather than letting anti-meat groups drive the agenda and end up with policy decisions that impact farmers more than they should be.
Thank you. I think we've got a question for the back. Frank?
Frank Langrish. Really to Mike Gooding. Mike, I believe you've been closely involved with Farmers Fresh, which has been probably one of our few very successful farmer-owned businesses and have been very good at exporting lamb into Europe over the years, and hopefully will continue to do so. I'm a shareholder in Farmers First. I'm slightly concerned that I understand that you're no longer a director, and I just wonder whether you can tell us why, with your knowledge and experience of working in other places in the world.
Frank, thank you. Yes, I was a director of that business up until a few months ago. And I, like you, believe that actually having a farmer-owned, farmer-led business in the processing sector is critical to our interests as livestock producers. I think if you compare the sheep sector to some of the other sectors, and where you've seen consolidation and control in relatively few hands, I don't think it's a good thing for us as livestock producers. As I tried to point out in my presentation and my comments, I think this is the time for us to be ambitious and to get out there and think differently, and to grasp the opportunities that are definitely out there of all of these people to feed. To my mind, that means energy, drive, it needs fresh thinking, the influence of, particularly on the consumer side and the marketing of younger people who understand what interests them and how they make different buying decisions. All I would say, Frank, in answer to your question, is that perhaps some of my former colleagues don't share that level of ambition.
That's probably where we should leave. A question in the back right corner, if we've got the microphone.
Hello. Didn't have a question when I first sat down, but listening to things, it strikes me that one of your biggest markets is British Joe Public, and it is so ignorant, and I mean ignorant of what goes on a farm. It does not know. You're going to need an advertising campaign which rivals Amazon. You know, and it's going to have, because they just pump at you all the time. Anybody wants anything, straight to Amazon. You're going to need an advertising campaign equal to that, because you're not going to change the perception that, you know, methane is a greenhouse gas, which we know it isn't. It only hangs around for about 12 years. You really, and they're because there's no shipping cost, particularly to selling in this country. If you're shipping, you mentioned over there, you start shipping abroad, you've got the cost of diesel, insurance, things like that. It's a big market. It's a big market that needs, you know, well, you're just going to have to advertise to and get the money from somewhere that's dependent on agriculture, like machinery supplies, things like that, to finance an ongoing daytime, evening time promotion of British food, because they just don't know. They really don't. And there's no farmer actually gets out there and talks to the British public. Isn't it a lovely day today? No, it's not. You know, the price is through the floor. Yeah. You know, it's got to be big, and it's going to have to be led by people like you.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm going to hand that to Phil, because obviously AHDB do a lot of promotion of lamb, so I'm sure he'd like to respond to that, and then find out how New Zealand try and tackle that. But yeah. Where you go, Phil?
Yeah, thanks.
So I mean, there's a finite budget in all things. So we have active promotional campaigns. They might not necessarily be things like TV campaigns that you might have historically gone to, because the market's more sophisticated and you can target younger consumers with digital-based promotional activity. But there is a limit, and in the recent AHDB vote round, clearly farmers have voted or expressed their views that they share, that they want to see more domestic and international promotion to get the product in front of consumers. Consumers respond to that in different ways, but our current campaign targets the consumers that are wavering or are thinking about their meat eating profile, because those are the consumers that you really have the greatest impact in. You know, you are not the audience that you'd want to spend a lot of money on a marketing campaign for sheep meat, because you're already high consumers dedicated to the product, etc., etc. So it isn't just simply about huge amounts of money, it's about being very specific and targeted with the limited amount of funds that you have. But certainly, if there was more money, there'd be more to do.
So we'll hand to Nick.
Exactly what Phil said, but I'll give you an example of how New Zealand's doing it. So a few years ago, our farmers asked us to create a New Zealand brand. So all New Zealand red meat is sold under the same brand. Each company will have its own brands under that. So that was called Taste Pure Nature. And so we went out and we did market research to figure out who we're trying to be targeting and where. And that came back with, what we call the conscious foodie, which is your sort of, late 20 to late 30-year-old person who's quite interested in food and trying new things, and they're willing to pay a bit more for it. So we target our advertising, which is very much digital. It's the channels they use. It's using social media influencers, taking them out. We do a project with the US lamb industry to get influencers down to a cooking school where they learn about the benefits of cooking lamb, how it tastes, why it's healthy, and then they share that on their social media channels, and then geographically that's targeted into California and the tri-state area, sort of New York way. So it is very targeted advertising to a certain subset of consumers, because we're not producing any more lamb. There's a limited supply, and we need to target the consumers who are going to pay the most for it.
Thank you. And a quick word from Mike.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, Dan. With the greatest respect, please, please, please don't describe customers as ignorant. We actually have a great story to tell, and the fact that the customers don't understand that is actually our challenge. It's our problem. We failed to win that argument. I farm in Oxfordshire, and Oxfordshire County Council have tried to take red meat off all the public sector catering. And whilst I think they're extremely ignorant, my approach to them must be to correct the folly of their understanding. So I'm sure you wouldn't hear a Kiwi to say that their customers are ignorant. We have to get onto the educational ladder and make sure that all of the arguments, and I agree with you completely about sustainability. Carbon has hijacked the whole sustainability issue, and we have many more strengths to talk about when it comes down to being lamb producers. So we need to help educate rather than criticise.
Thank you, Mike. So, question from Frank again, I believe, and then David, and then we're probably running out of time.
Just one small issue that we have, well actually it's more than a small issue if you're a pedigree breeder, is that we can't get anything out of this country anymore because there are no border control posts in Europe. And now it may not affect enormous numbers of people, but it affects a few people to a very large amount of money. And there has been, the NFU I know have been trying to open these border control posts. But if we don't have them, we can't export anything. You can't get any journey plans issued. The irony is that since Brexit, anything can come into this country without any checks whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this can't continue, I feel. And I think it's down to the likes of AHDB and people to actually help us to try and get these up and running again, so we can have some trade in live animals again.
Yeah, no, Frank, I completely appreciate that. I mean, this is a massive issue in terms of genetics, basically, isn't it? How we get our genetics out of this country and into Europe and beyond. But as far as meat's concerned, it's not limiting that at the moment. So we understand.
There is a huge market still in Europe for salt, and periods like this when we have a massive drought.
Yeah. Yeah. That would take lambs out of the market. No, I agree with that. So unless any speakers got a comment on that, we'll leave that.
All I'd say, Frank, is that maybe with all of those holiday makers parked up near your farm, A, you should try and flog them something, but B, it might become politically more sensitive that border control posts don't work properly. That's a serious comment, because if it becomes politically important, it's perhaps an opportunity to get some things changed.
Thank you. David Croston.
Yeah, just a lot of can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, so we've heard, everybody's talked about opportunities. Listening to Phil Stocker behind us, he was talking about all the change that's going on, opportunities, change, embracing change. I just wonder in that situation if Mike could be more specific, wise, less farmers first.
Well, let's talk about opportunities, David, and I'll say I'm not going to make any more comment about that at the moment, but I'll very happily share a beer at lunchtime.